My name is Ann Théato, and welcome to the Psychic Matters podcast, episode number 30. We are just over a year old, and Psychic Matters had her birthday on February 13th this year. So I want to take this opportunity to say happy birthday to all of you listeners and all of those who have been my guests so far, who have come on the show and willingly shared their incredible knowledge with the world. The Psychic Matters podcast was created as a free resource for anyone with an interest in the metaphysical arts. It's here for everyone, and especially for those who might not be able to physically attend a class or who may not have the finances to do so. So if you know anyone anywhere in the world whom you feel might benefit from listening, please do tell them all about us and get them to subscribe to the show. This week, our episode is called Life in the Stars. Here's a quick trailer of what is coming up.
Astronomy is the study of the physical properties of planets, stars, etc. Astrology is the study of how these planets, stars, celestial bodies affect us on Earth. You see, a lot of people don't know their time of birth, so they can't say, oh, I want my chart drawn up. I will look at one astrological point called the Moon's North Node, which will tell us very much what our spiritual path is here on Earth now. We can have a look at your spiritual path and purpose in life, that when we're consciously aware of what that path is, then we can consciously walk that path, obviously, and realise which doors open. And life becomes so much more rewarding when we're consciously connected with what it is that we're doing here.
If you're ready, sit back and get comfortable. Or if you're out on a walk, don't forget to turn on your Strava at the same time as listening so you can record how many steps you've done. You are going to love this episode. Oh, and by the way, if you really enjoy this episode, please do leave me a written review on iTunes or Stitcher. Here we go. I have an extraordinary guest on the show this week. This lady began reading palms and tarot at the incredibly young age of 14. She has pursued an interest in all things metaphysical ever since, working as a clairvoyant, a clairaudient, and a clairsentient, and she'll explain those terms to you in a moment. This amazing lady works in print, television, and radio. Her horoscope columns appear in newspapers, magazines, and online across Australia and internationally. She is an award-winning published author, and her annual Astrology Diaries are now in their 5th year of publication. Ladies and gentlemen, stop what you're doing for the moment, put your hands together, and let's give a really warm welcome to the incredibly talented Patsy Bennett. Patsy, welcome to Psychic Matters.
Hi, Anne. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. It's great to see you. And you're on the other side of the world to me. Perhaps you'd like to tell everyone where you are residing at the moment.
Yes, well, I am in Australia on the East Coast in a small coastal town called Byron Bay.
Oh, beautiful.
It does receive an awful lot of visitors, but it's actually a very, very small town, very beautiful, very, very beautiful, very blessed to live here.
Yeah, I sometimes see you take beautiful photographs and put them on I think it must be your Instagram account where I see them.
Yes, yeah. It's so inspiring. I love being in nature. And yes, it's just the photos often explain the astrological circumstances we're in, enhance or, inspire the posts as well often, because, of course, we can find the peace and the calm that we seek around us in nature. And it's almost a case of inhaling it, and then we have it inside us as well. So I try and take the photos and share those, so perhaps they can be of some inspiration as well to those of us who can't at the moment, unfortunately, be outside in wild nature as much as we can at the moment. Glad to hear you like them.
Yeah, no, that's lovely, and I love that. inhaling it and taking it inside of yourself. I think that's really important. And I do, when I look at those photographs, it does take you to a beautiful place, and it just gives you those few seconds of, oh, this is beautiful. The world is a beautiful place.
Exactly. That's partly my reason for posting them, because it is so easy to allow ourselves to start believing the opposite almost, especially when we go through very difficult circumstances globally where we are at the moment. It's quite easy to see our minds going down that path. So that's partly my aim as well. Remind everyone, well, look, there is beauty all around, in a blade of grass, in the ocean. Let's all focus on the beauty and allow that to blossom and inspire us.
Yeah, that's lovely. Is that your lovely little dog we can hear in the background?
It's a dog going down to the beach, yes.
You've got your door open, letting the breeze go through. Well, we welcome all dogs on this podcast, so I hope that little doggy has a lovely walk down there this morning. Patsy, tell us, you started this kind of work, this metaphysical work, at a very young age. Can you go back and tell us a little bit about your early start, your early beginnings?
Yes, well, there is one particular memory that I have from when I was about 12. And I realise now in retrospect it was my first mediumistic impression or connection that I remember in any case, although I was thinking the other day of something that came before that, which now I can't remember what it was again. That's right. I was 12. And yes, and I saw and heard and felt my grandfather. I was sort of in this big featherbed in the dark, deep, distant woods of southern Germany in Bavaria, and in a very old house, creaky old house, and I was just falling asleep. And so I saw, heard and felt my grandfather, who had passed away several years before, cantering down on his horse down the corridor with about 15 other men on their horses, cantering down the corridor of this house. And of course, it's impossible to have a horse cantering down a corridor at about midnight. But of course, he was there, and I heard him. I could, smell the horses almost, and the turf being scuffed up. And, and as you know, it was just perfectly natural. And, oh, well, there he goes. Isn't that lovely? And at the time, just really not thinking too much of it. So that was really one of the first times where, in retrospect, I can think back and realize, yes, well, this was something that was just, it accompanies your life, and it's not unusual. It's not scary. There's nothing too much out of the ordinary about it. Of course, to other people, it may well seem that way. But yeah, so I can definitely pinpoint that. Then my aunt was a tarot reader, and she was always seen as slightly eccentric, and she gave me my first tarot deck when I was about 13 or 14. And yes, and so on we go from there to the present day. So just really developing from those circumstances, those experiences.
Gosh, you're lucky to have an aunt who already was a tarot reader, somebody who already accepted her own gifts and therefore encouraged your own as well. So that must have been, well, I guess you wouldn't have known anything different, but I know some of us have had completely the opposite, where our gifts are not accepted immediately. Do you remember what your tarot pack was at that time?
Eye-Opening Moments podcast are real-life stories of adversity, encounters, and perspectives. They are moments that can lift your spirits, give you some food for thought, or move you. For the introspective mind that likes to reflect, discover, and find solutions or meaning in a complex life, listen to Eye-Opening Moments podcasts.
It was a very basic one. I actually found it because, I tend to keep all these things, and it was literally just pictures and then one word. And I guess technically it wasn't a tarot deck, and it was in German. It was a completely different language. Yes, just pictures of people, and she sort of pressed that into my hand as I was leaving. generally the whole family looked down on her, but obviously she perhaps she could see something in me and thought, come on, you've got to continue this tradition. Don't listen to anyone else. Here's your deck. Don't tell anyone. Yeah, so lovely lady. Quite eccentric, definitely eccentric.
Oh, she sounds amazing. And Germany, you've mentioned that a couple of times. So were you brought up in Germany, Patsy?
No, I was. I'm actually a New Zealander. So
right.
this was dark and distant past sort of family connections who had come over from Eastern Europe to Germany. So yes, through my mum. So there is a gypsy connection there to the family going back. So, of course, we can see the tarot and the card and the tea reading. The palm reading was actually one of the first things that I ever did when I was about 18, where I sort of ventured out and worked with complete strangers. Up until that point, I'd read tarot for friends and family. But when I was about 18, I decided, well, that's it. I'm going to test my knowledge here. I'm going to read the palms of the very elderly to tell them everything that's already happened in their life. And so that was wonderful because, then, of course, you get the validation that, that's correct. So, yes, and it was actually my father who comes from an Irish heritage who was particularly interested in palmistry. So I used to read all his books on palmistry. And so that's what got me into palmistry as well at a very young age.
And so how did you do that? You say you went and read for the elderly and you summoned the courage and you did it and it was very successful. But how did you do that? Where did you find these elderly people to read their hands, their palms?
Well, I did practice on friends and family initially, and having read my dad's books, that are very scientific, about this line means exactly this, and if it's exactly here over by a millimetre, then it means this, and we can time dates, So I did literally study it in that sense. But that was really when I discovered that actually I would completely ignore all of that, and the palms are a very concentrated energy in our palms. And so, if you look at some of the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs or paintings, they often have the gods, with their palms up. And I used to always think, well, that's because they're showing how much energy comes from the palm. So what I would actually do was I wouldn't actually read every line because I'd thrown that out. And I found that actually I would get images. So I was using my clairvoyance through the palms just because they're a concentration of energy. It's a bit like, if I wanted to, I could get a crystal ball and look at that for someone, or if they've just handled a flower or a chair, whatever it might be. Like it's psychometry. So a bit like psychometry, really, with holding their palms, hands, or just looking at them. And so, yes, that was where the psychic sort of abilities were kicking in.
And so for those people that perhaps don't know what clairvoyance is, or perhaps you could explain clairvoyance, in fact, the difference perhaps between being a clairvoyant, a clairaudient, and a clairsentient. And then tell us perhaps people might find it very interesting if you went into the how. How do you use that when you're looking at a palm? How does that work?
So clairvoyance literally means clear seeing. So for me, it's very much a case of, well, first I'll answer part A of your question, then part B.
Thank you, Patsy. Sorry, it's a long question.
Part B, if I forget about it. So part A. The difference, so clairvoyance literally means clear seeing. So this is where we will see information that comes to us. So for some people, and for me, it's a bit like watching a movie. So where I was talking about there, I would have clairvoyance in someone's palm, then I would literally have images that would come to my mind or that would play in front of my eyes, a bit like a movie that would really just be working with the energy in their palm. So clairvoyance in mediumship, of course, if you're a clairvoyant medium, then you see those in spirit, and I'll see them, say if I'm doing a demonstration, they will literally walk along, and so I'll describe what they're wearing, what they would like, to share with me, the colour of the dog, or the fur, if it's dark, light, spotted, that kind of thing. So clairvoyance in that sense. So really seeing using your psychic abilities, and it can often appear like a movie if it comes to me, if I'm looking at a palm. In mediumship, I'll see the relative or the important communicator in spirit standing behind the sitter or my recipient. So clairvoyance, clear seeing. Clairaudience, clear hearing. So where information will come to me, especially in a mediumship reading, and often I will have it shouted to me. So you sort of hear information, and it's slightly different. I'm sure that you know as well. It's slightly different to hearing someone out there shouting at us, or a dog out there, like the dog that just went past barking at us. It's sort of a little bit closer. It could sometimes be a whisper, sometimes a shout. Sometimes I do have those in spirit, like I say, literally shouting at me. And because, shouting their name at me because I haven't quite managed to serve them as well as I may have liked to. So literally clairaudience, clear hearing. And so whether it's whispers or shouts. Clairsentience, where we feel, we sense. And, we can have clairsentient knowingness, of course, so claircognizance as well, a bit of a mix of the two, where we sense and feel and just know. We just know. So in the same way, if someone said to me, how do you get from here to Boots, the shop? We don't have them here, but let's pretend we're in England. And for anyone in the States listening, it's a shop. If someone said to me, or you, how do you get to Boots? You just know. And you say, you turn left there, turn right, turn left. Go around the roundabout 3 times and turn left again. So clairsentience, clear sensing, claircognizance, clear not knowingness, where you simply know the information. And it's a very, in the same way, if I can describe that, how do you get to Boots? Well, you just know. And so that feeling, if you think about it, if you ask yourself, how do you walk from here to the living room? Well, and if you just tap into that feeling of that knowingness, then with experience, we know when we know within a mediumship connection, of course, or in a psychic sense.
That's a really good explanation.
Thank you.
It's really good. I find it sometimes quite difficult to explain it to people so succinctly, but that's really wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Patsy. So let's go to your astrology then, if that's okay. After you started to read palms for people, where did you go from there? Can you cast your mind back?
Yes, well, the interest in astrology came in around about at the age of 14. So that was...
it was parallel as well.
Yes, it was parallel. And that was partly, again, because of my father's book. So, but also for me, being a bit of a researcher, I like to research how things work. I decided around that age that there were certain things that had a pattern. So, for example, the sun comes up, sun goes down. Moon has its phases. We tend to want to have 3 meals a day, especially when you're at school. You have your school dinner, and then you get home and have another one. But then other things would happen where, for example, they didn't have that same pattern, such as no one would ring me for 2 weeks or something, and I would start feeling very dejected. And then all of a sudden I'd get 4 phone calls on the same day, or there wouldn't be any parties for months, and then everything would happen again on the same day, and you can only go to one. So I did start thinking, well, what's the pattern with that? Because there's other patterns that are really obvious, as I say, like the sun and the moon and just appetites, all sorts of things that we can think about. And so I thought, well, there must be a pattern to do with, again, traffic, for example. So this was phone calls. Why don't I get phone calls at 9 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon at 6 at night? Why do we get no buses for 3 hours and then 4 turn up? I mean, we do know, obviously, we have free will. People can ring me when they want, and a bus can get stuck in traffic. But I did feel I should probably have a look into this. And so I found astrology had a lot of the answers. And interesting enough, when we look at the phases or the cycles of Mercury, the planet Mercury, which rules communications and traffic, or we might say travel or vehicles, we can then map, that's why I got all those phone calls that day and I didn't get any for 3 weeks. We can literally find the pattern, within there. So, so that got me more and more interested. And so I did take a formal course at the Faculty of Astrological Studies in London, but that wasn't until sort of my mid-20s, I would say. So in between sort of 18 and mid-20s, I was a very devout Buddhist and spent those 5 years meditating. And much of the information you receive when you go into those altered states through meditation and the transmissions from your teacher, your Lama, are actually psychic transmissions. So working in many different ways, in many different forms, just developing, I guess, in the bigger term, spirituality and understanding of what on earth are we doing and what on earth is going on.
Yeah, I think that's our total quest, isn't it? All of us in this field trying to learn more and more and more and uncover more about how we operate and communicate with each other. So you had your qualification from the Faculty of Astrological Studies in London. And what did you do with that then?
I did finish a diploma course. The qualifications I got more from uni, from a degree in French and German literature, and then a Master of Arts in French literature. And then I started a PhD in French literature, specifically Surrealist theory, which I didn't finish. See, the wonderful way that everything fits together is just incredible, because really what happened when I was studying my French and German literature initially with that degree was I had to study, I think it's 17th and 18th century plays and theatre and philosophy, all that sort of thing. And a lot of that was then based on Greek mythology. So I'm getting to the connection any minute now. The astrological, or they're not even astrological, the planets are named after Greek gods. So basically I spent a good few years studying Greek mythology, Roman mythology, and philosophical thought. And basically then when that connected with my astrology studies, that information of the mythology, which is looking at particular archetypes and not only life paths, but also behavioural archetypes, informed me to a very deep degree about the astrological properties of planets that had been named by astronomers, many thousands of years ago, and astrologers, because it was only really until relatively recently that astronomy and astrology split, because they were always one and the same. If you were an astronomer, you were an astrologer as well. It was only really around the age of reason, the age of enlightenment, that the two split into separate studies. So basically, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I'm fascinated. I'm so fascinated. Please keep going.
So that's what happened really, was that all the studies were all converging, and so where we might sort of think, well, what has a degree in French or, a Master of Arts in Surrealist theory, what has that got to do with astrology or mediumship in any way, shape or form? But it does all, especially when we look back at the various twists and turns in the paths that we take, they do always add up to, especially when we're conscious that we're on a spiritual quest, they do all most definitely add up to that wonderful, coincidences, which may appear to be very, very different and very separate, avenues of study. They do all overlap and bring this sense of understanding.
Astronomy and astrology have split as separate studies. So can you succinctly say what is astronomy and what is astrology now then?
So astronomy is the study of the physical properties of planets, stars, etc. Astrology is the study of how these planets, stars, celestial bodies affect us on Earth. So we very much, where this split was when Copernicus discovered that the sun is the centre of the universe, not the Earth. So, of course, until that time, everyone believed the Earth was the centre of the universe, therefore we are, therefore everything affects us, kind of thing. Everything revolves around us. We are the sort of lens through which everything is seen. When Copernicus proved, well, no, actually the sun is the centre of the universe, science or astrology and astronomy split, because astronomy wanted to then say, oh no, so that means we can be objective, we can look at the solar system from the outside, so we no longer interpret, we no longer see how it affects us, we can just look at how, the physical properties of the planets, the origins of the universe, perhaps, what these planets are made of. It's all very fascinating sort of thing. Whereas astrology very much was still looking at, despite the fact that the sun is physically in the centre of the solar system, very much looking at, well, how do the physical properties and the positions they're in at various different times in their orbits, how do they affect us here on Earth? And there is a degree of interpretation involved in that. But it is, both of them really very much began as an empirical science. They were very much based in, I'm going to look, I'm going to study, I'm going to notice, and then I'm going to write down what happened, and what happens. So at a full moon, it's a good time to plant tomatoes. At a new moon, Aunt Jemima goes wandering off with the ducks every time, whichever it may be. So we can write all that down and realise over many, many thousands of years, and we've got documented evidence going back even to, I think it's 13,000 BC, in a cave in the south of France, where we found a bison horn, sort of a cave painting of a bison horn. It was considered to be, but may well be the moon, crescent moon, with 13 lines in it. And, so we have 13 lunar months. So that was already a kind of a calendar. And we can go back 3,000 years to Babylonian, the first horoscope. So it's been, thousands of years of study and observation that has all come together to work out, well, this is what happens when the moon rises over there, and that's what happens when the sun sets over there, and you've got that big red dot next to it. Oh, it's Mars. When Mars is close to the sun, these kind of things happen. Joey gets really angry, so we'd better keep an eye on that kind of thing. So all been, tabulated over thousands of years. So I'm not sure how an astronomer would explain. Perhaps an astronomer would say, no, we don't just look at the physical properties. But that's really where it split, where it was deemed really in the age of reason, look, we can't interpret anymore. We can't have wishy-washy ideas about how this affects us. We need to be able to prove with mathematics and measurements that this is how it is, and we're not really worried about what Joey feels like when we've got Mars in that part of the, it was a bit too much of a leap of interpretation rather than cold hard fact. I do believe astronomy and astrology will link again as we all advance and we all realise there's no such thing as objective certainty, that, we're always going to be the lens through which we look at things. But for now, where astronomy and astrology have separated.
Patsy, it's fascinating. I'm learning so much, and I'm sure everybody listening is as well. When someone comes to see you then for a reading, how do you use your astrology?
Well, generally people will, I'll ask them right at the start, do you prefer, would you prefer an astrology reading? Would you prefer a psychic reading? Would you prefer, mediumship reading? Any specific, preference? And sometimes people will already book in and they'll say, I would like a 20-page astrological report and a 1-hour consultation. So, that's what I provided, and away they go. Where it's sort of a general person who hasn't really and hasn't perhaps thought about for themselves, or who doesn't know that there are these many different ways that we can read and gain insight and guidance for people, then I tend to work initially clairvoyantly, where I will have a look at the bigger picture, at what's going on for people, behind what they already know that's going on. The main astrological point I'll use where we don't need to know your time of birth. You see, a lot of people don't know their time of birth, so they can't say, I want my chart drawn up. And I will look at one astrological point called the Moon's North Node, which will tell us very much what our spiritual path is here on Earth now. It's a kind of an archetype. There are 12, and then we get, if I do look at the chart, we can get other type of influences that add to that give us more insight into this spiritual path. But astrologically, I tend to, even if someone would like a psychic reading, which I see as a spiritual reading, then I will suggest, if you like, we can have a look at your spiritual path and purpose in life, that when we're consciously aware of what that path is, then we can consciously walk that path, obviously, and realize which doors open, and life becomes so much more rewarding when we're consciously connected with what it is that we're doing here.
And what would that 20, if you did a 20-page report for somebody, what would be on all those 20 pages?
So on the 20 pages of an astrology report, I would deconstruct, I would literally take them apart astrologically. I would tell them, you have Sun in Virgo in the first house, and this is what this means. You have the moon in Sagittarius in the 12th house, what this means. Then, because people are really fascinated by that, and even, what is a house? Because everyone has heard that song, When the Moon is in the 7th house,
yes.
And love is all around. So everyone wants to know about houses. They're fascinating. So I will take people apart into all their separate components astrologically, because so each planet. And the sun obviously is a star, moon is a moon, it's not a planet. And then there are other astrological points like the Moon's North Node. I'll speak a little bit about them separately and then bring everything together. So basically an astrologer's job is to bring together many, many, many hundreds, if we look at many different levels, maybe to begin with just tens of pieces of information, bring them all together, which is then the person, of course. They're not all separate bits. And explain, well, look, these are your separate components. When they all work together in this way, these are the kinds of talents you have and natural gifts. So these are wonderful things. Really spend more time developing these if you can, if you would like to. These are the possible pitfalls. So, the good thing about pitfalls or challenges or tense areas of our lives is that we can work on them and find purpose in having overcome things. So, I can take those apart and say, well, these are the components of that tendency or that pattern you have in your life. So, and this is a great way to work with that and overcome it, or to anticipate the kind of outcome that certain behavioural patterns may result in. And then basically also look at transits. So transits are where the planets where they are today have an effect on us, on all of us. That's the basic tenet of astrology, of course. But we can look at the details of how that's affecting each individual by mapping where the planets are today onto the chart of where the planets are when they were born. And then we can actually time as well. So that's how predictions come in. So initially we can say, well, I see that you have a Jupiter transit of your natal moon. So this can mean very strong emotions coming up, for example, depending on their natal chart. And then we can also look at, for example, people might say, yeah, but when am I going to meet my, husband to be? Or when am I going to get the job? When am I going to move? And so we can map forward and say, well, these are the dates where you're most likely to move. These are the dates where you're likely to meet someone. So definitely, if you want to meet someone, don't sit at home because they don't knock on your door. Go somewhere with like-minded people, because this is when the doors are opening. this is when things can happen. So it can be incredibly useful for people with their planning. I have worked quite a lot with people planning families, who perhaps have started IVF or had to, resort to all sorts of different attempts to start a family, and working very much with, well, look, this is when a window is going to open. This could be a good time for IVF. This could be, not such a good time. And there's some very good news recently where one of my clients announced that, she was past the 3-month mark in her pregnancy, and yes.
Oh, congratulations to that couple. That's wonderful. That's really fascinating, Patsy, all of this. So when did you start to study mediumship and psychic work? I mean, you've obviously been always psychic and always mediumistic from your early experiences, but when did you go and study that aspect of your work?
So to seriously study it consciously as a medium, as opposed to, like I was saying, in my late teens, early 20s, where I was working a lot with meditation and, Tibetan type yogic practices. When I look back, a lot of those meditations are exactly what we use as mediums, or that we help to train our mind to become very clear. But as a distinction to that, so consciously deciding that's it, I would like to develop these skills, would have been in 2011. So not that long ago, to actually have started a formal process of, right, that's it, I want to know how this is done, kind of thing. So what's that, 9 years ago? It's 10 years ago now. Yes.
Amazing. Because I met you once upon a time, didn't I, in the corridor of the Arthur Findlay College when we were both there. That was a few years ago now. Gosh, we miss that place.
Isn't it? Oh, I know, me too. Oh, it's just such a beautiful place, and just it just makes me so happy that it exists,
Yeah, such a beautiful place. And it's quite difficult when you're there because the weeks are so intense. You're learning from 9 a.m. till 9 p.m. Meet someone like yourself. Patsy, let's get together. Let's try and have a chat. And it's just trying to find the time within that time frame. It's like,
It is, as you say, a very intense experience, but one that you never forget, of course.
Yes.
And again, it's almost like, I just want to soak up all the wonderful, the residue, the psychic residue almost of all those wonderful people who have walked those corridors as well.
That's right.
Just experiencing it, and just sensing, just feeling very enriched and at home.
You feel very at home, don't you? And the energy of the place and the smell of the place, and like you say, the landscape outside when you just go walking. Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful place to go and learn. Patsy, do you have a sort of an exercise that people could do at home that they might be able to predict something or use astrology in some way?
Yes, well, a very straightforward one that everyone can do, because we all know when there's a full moon, is to just keep an eye on, what do I feel like during a full moon? A lot of people can't sleep. A lot of people can sleep incredibly well. A lot of people might feel particularly intuitive, or they might feel particularly anxious. So really almost a bit in the same way that we might keep a dream diary. We might keep an astrology diary or a full moon diary. And then, mapping for yourself, depending on which sign it's in, what are the kinds of things that happen when we've got a full moon in Aries? What are the kinds of things that happen, the following month when it's full moon in Taurus? And the same we can do with new moons, very, very easy and straightforward. And then, you will discover that there's a pattern. That there's a pattern, we might feel particularly, as I say, very intuitive during one particular full moon or new moon. But similarly with Mercury retrograde phases, keeping an eye on, is this a particularly difficult time for me? Some people find it very difficult. Or is this actually a time where my mediumship improves, or a time where I always get in touch with my old friends, or they get in touch with me? There are many different ways that these celestial events can affect us and in very individual ways. So I would suggest that kind of thing with astrology, just to gain that insight of, well, this is how I feel when that happens. I actually had one of my tutors astrology tutors, who I think she was a Cancerian, so sun sign Cancer, and which is ruled by the moon. And she used to wear the colours of the moon sign that the moon was in, because it changes signs every 2 days, depending on which sign it was in, because she discovered that if she wore sort of white or silver clothes when the moon was in Cancer, then she just felt happier. She felt more in sync with things. When the moon was in Aries, she'd wear bright red, and fair enough, everyone sat up and listened to her. So definitely it does really come down to observation, how it is for you personally, and then moving forward with that.
Wow, I'm going to try that, definitely. Put on my colours and see how I feel. What you also, before we finish, I know that you're a writer and you write horoscope columns for newspapers and magazines, etc. But I also know that you create and publish and write Astrology Diaries, and they are now in their 5th year of publication. Tell us about those, Patsy, and how they might assist us.
So basically, what I do with the Astrology Diaries is, well, first of all, they're diaries. So you can use them as planners. And what I do is I interpret the astrological situation or circumstances for each day. So where, for example, in general, we might say that a full moon in Libra suggests that we may find it's a good time to find more balance in our lives, that kind of thing. On the same day, there may well be the full moon may be conjunct or in alignment with Mars from this perspective. And so that will have a bearing on the outcome or the general mood of that day, therefore the kinds of actions you may take. So I explain those very briefly and very succinctly, because otherwise there'd be no room for you to write your notes. So I just sort of write in there, a great day for business financial meetings, or, a lovely day for romance, or a great time to start a new sports or fitness routine. And so just as a general guide for people to have a look at, and then it just has a little bit of a blog before that, a little bit of a summary of what the planets are doing that month and how that might affect that particular sun sign. So just really guides to each day of the year, but also a little summary right at the start of the kinds of things we might expect that year. Just so that comes out yearly, and so far, yes, it's been well received.
Yeah, it's fabulous, Patsy. And if somebody wanted to go and purchase it, where would they find one?
So the Astrology Diary, I actually have one specifically for the Northern Hemisphere, because us in Australia in the Southern Hemisphere, there's 2 editions, one for the Northern Hemisphere, which you would get in England. Right. So you can get it in any major bookseller, and you can get it online as well. So Amazon, etc., all your regular places. And Southern Hemisphere one here in Australia, all our regular bookshops. And in America, online and also in their various different bookshops. There you'd get the Northern Hemisphere edition as well. There's another book. Do you want to hear about the new book?
Yes, we do, Patsy. Tell us about that.
So there is a new book coming out, and it will explain in more detail, because we tend to have that general information about this is what a full moon means in this sign, and this is what a new moon means in that, and that's what Mercury retrograde means for everyone in general. But of course, we're all individuals. So my new book, which will be out later this year, without giving too much away, because it's still in production, will look more specifically at what all these celestial events mean for us individually according to our sun sign. So rather than just according to nothing, which is often yours. The full moon means this. It's not according, there's no reference point. So we do actually have a reference point with the new book coming out. And yes, because I thought, well, you know what, it's very important that that we know that a full moon for one person is likely to mean something very different to someone else. Otherwise, we'd all be walking around like automatons, just all doing exactly the same thing on the same day at the same time, which is clearly not the case.
And what is the name of the new book?
It is called, and I'm not even sure if I'm meant to be.
Don't say it. It's a work. Okay, so you can.
Work in progress. There, I can give you the name of something else, though. It's an incredibly busy year. 2 other projects. One is a series of sun sign books. So Aries, Taurus, Gemini, with predictions for each day of the year. That's coming out in September this year. So it'll be available around the world. That came out initially 2020. We didn't do one for 2021 because of various logistics to do with shipping and what have you this last year.
Yes.
But that's going to be out in September this year for 2022.
Okay.
And then the Zodiac reading cards, the Oracle cards, are being relaunched as the Zodiac Moon reading cards in March.
So these are cards, these are Zodiac cards that you've created, Patsy.
Yes.
And how do we use those?
So that's an Oracle card deck. It initially came out 3 years ago as the Zodiac reading cards. And basically, so we can use them like an Oracle deck. And just to gain guidance every day, we can literally just shuffle them, pick one card if we like, or 3, or 10. And but generally, we can use them. It is based on predictive astrology. So we have cards for new moons, full moons, and eclipses. And that can actually help you to understand a little bit about the kind of energy around those celestial events, if you're studying astrology, but also if you just want to use them as an oracle deck, then they tend to, very cleverly, of their own accord, completely separate from how I had ever intended, give you this wonderful insight. So they've impressed me the most, I think, because they work in all sorts of interesting ways.
What a wonderful tool. Well, that's really great. What I'll do is I'll put the resources. You can give me the URLs for people to get hold of those, and I'll put them in the show notes for this program, which will be available on my website. Before we finish, if people want to come to you for a reading, how do they find you?
So they will find me through my website, which is patsybennett.com, www.patsybennett.com.
And that's Bennett, N-T?
Yeah, Patsy with a Y. And if they're in Australia, same, but also Astrocast. So Astro and then cast, CAST.com.au. There are all the links there, for making bookings, or you can ring me or email me.
Patsy, it's been so brilliant talking to you. You've just shared so much with the listeners here today, and I have learned an incredible amount. I'm going straight out to buy your Astrology Diary so that I can plan my year ahead, and I'm going to be looking into the colours that I'm wearing and just see if I can't enhance my life in that way as well. Patsy, what does the next week hold for you? Are you busy this week coming up, this next month?
Yes, very, very busy. But I do like being busy. As they say, if you work at what you love, then you don't do a day's work in your life. And I have to say I'm incredibly grateful that I am able to work in fields that interest me very deeply. So, and I love nothing more than working with people as well. To bring either mediumship connections through, or just to gain that insight about themselves and the best way forward. So, yes, very busy, and also writing, obviously, the new books. Very busy year and a very busy week, but all is well. So I thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, gosh, it's such a pleasure. We can just tell your passion for your topic when you speak about it, and you've got so much knowledge. And just thank you, Patsy, so much on behalf of everybody and myself for so generously sharing that with us today.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you for doing your podcast. They're wonderful and fantastic. And all the best for the rest of the year. I'm sure we'll catch up before the end of it, though.
We will, Patsy. Thank you again.
Thank you. All the best. Bye-bye.
Patsy Bennett there, everybody. An incredibly talented lady. Please do go and buy her Astrology Diaries and use them to plan out a hugely successful 2021 for yourselves. All the show notes for this episode, including a complete transcript, plus resources and links for everything mentioned, can be found on my website, anntheato.com, ANNTHEATO.com. So do head over there and pick those up. You can take a quick look while you're there at a couple of training courses that I've got coming up. There's 2 on tarot with a fantastic, talented tarot tutor, Leslie Malone, and there's 1 fabulous group past life regression journey with me. Also, hold on to your hats, because later on this year, I'm launching a school called Ann Théato's Class, Centre for Learning and Spiritual Studies, where you will be able to download many different classes on many different topics to learn at home in your own time. If you are interested in learning about my new class or my new school, please email me, ann@anntheato.com, and I can send you all details. For now, I want to thank you, everybody, for being fantastic listeners. I really do appreciate each one of you. We are now a year old and have reached almost 15,000 downloads of this podcast worldwide, which is an incredible achievement, and one of which I'm really, really proud. I could not have done it without you. Thank you for your support. Wherever you are in the world, my name is Ann Théato, and thank you for listening to Psychic Matters.